Hey everyone, welcome back to Dad Space, the podcast for dads by dads. And today we're going to have somebody on the show. He's a speaker, trainer, writer. He's an advocate for us for mental health. And I know as men, we're always searching for mental health support, tools, things to help us. And we chatted before we hit record that podcasting is this beautiful space where nobody knows what you're listening to right now. You could be listening to Ariana Grande, or you can be listening to Dave here talking about mental health, and nobody needs to know. And that's the beauty of podcasts. I just love the fact that we can listen in, learn from somebody, and feel safe to listen to this conversation without having to explain why we hit play on this episode. So David Bartley's here with us. We're going to be going through so much stuff today. I'm so happy to have him here on Dad Space. David, when you get two Davids together on one podcast, only good things are going to come out of this. So welcome to the show.
Brother, you are so right.
Right?
You know, David squared, D squared, you know, priceless squared, whatever. I've always loved my name. I love the name. I just have loved my name. No, I don't know. Yeah. No, anyway.
So I live in...
But no, I'm very happy to be here.
I live in Canada, and there's this song, I don't even know. It might be a Canadian thing, but there's a song called These Are the Daves I Know. I don't know if you've ever heard this song, but it's a whole song about all the different Daves that this person is singing about. God. And he goes from Dave to Dave to Dave to Dave. And he's like walking down the road. He's like, this is the Dave I know, and this is the Dave I know. It's like the weirdest song ever. I'll send you a link. It is so odd. But every time I meet another Dave, that song is in my head. And
yes, please.
Okay, I'll send you the link.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the show notes for all the other Daves listening. Please enjoy. These are the Daves I know. But anyway, so...
And last thing about the name. I think our name is not as commonplace today as it was like when you and I, you know, you don't meet that many Davids.
No. Because, well, there's a limit, right? There's a limit to how many you can allow on the planet at any given time. So you and I, got in there somehow. We
snuck in. Beautiful.
All right.
Beautiful.
So, okay, I'm on your website while we're chatting. Let's start right there off the top. I know there's a rebrand of the website happening in real time, but for those listening, tell us about your website. Let's start here because I have it up while we're chatting. Let's start that as our beginning point. Take us to the site.
So I am a suicide attempt survivor, and on August 31st, 2011, I tried to kill myself. I tried to jump off the upper deck, the deck of a 730-foot tall bridge known as the Forest Hill Bridge, which is about 2 hours outside of San Francisco, close to Sacramento in Northern California. But by the grace of God, I was saved. And that, brother, started what I like to say when people say, well, hey, what do you do? I say, well, actually, I'm a suicide attempt survivor, and I share my journey from mental hellness to mental wellness. And it's a journey that, and you and I talked about this literally just before we hit record. It's very changeable. It's very active. It's very robust. And so I am blessed to be surrounded by extraordinary human beings. I'm engaged to the love of my life, who is also now a school psychologist, which is kind of cool. So we keep mental health in the family. I am the youngest of four boys. My three brothers, 6, 9, and 11 years older than I, and they are pivotal parts of my life. And we lost our father. I was just 7. Our father was just 42, and he had died of cancer, but had debilitating, crippling depression. And my grandfather had killed himself. So all 4 of us were in the direct line of the genetics. But if you look at my 3 older brothers, thank God there's no depression at all. And you have to think like, what happened? What is it about David that would have him have suffered from this for so long? And it really is no word. I was raped. I was actually sodomized on repeat occasions by a Boy Scout leader when I was new in the Boy Scouts. And every time this thing, a human being wouldn't do this. A thing would, a monster, a villain, an evil spirit He said, David, don't forget, these are initiations and all the boys go through it, but we never talk about it. And so I lived, I was 12. I'm a child of the 60s. I was born in 1963. I'm 61 years old now. And I live with it. And ultimately, brother, what happens for dads, and we'll just keep it in the dad category, is when we don't share things like that are slowly but consistently, like literally eroding our soul, the essence of who we are, it'll kill us. And then I shared the quote with you before we hit record, and it's such an amazing quote. Maya Angelou is an amazing soul. And she says, there's no greater agony than bearing the weight of an untold story. So you have to think, brother, I mean, how many of our brothers are listening to this podcast right now carrying some weight? And it is, those instances, I don't know of any other way, and I'm not a clinician, I'm just a guy. It's the whatever happens, and it fits into this category of trauma. And trauma is, as defined, severe and lasting emotional shock and pain caused by an extremely upsetting experience. And you think, and I love definitions, and just think about the very first two words in that definition: severe and lasting. Right there. I mean, when I first read that, because I've been talking about trauma for a long time, and I thought, gosh, I should actually look at what's the definition. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. So, my want, and God blessed me to be connected with you, and if there's something that I can share that would help one dad out there, then I've hit a home run.
Whenever you go to the airport and you see somebody with way too many bags, okay, they're supposed to check the bags and all that. They're like, I'm just going to carry everything, and they have 45 shirts on because they don't want to put them in the bag. They've got 10 pairs of pants, 8 hats stacked on top of their head, and all this stuff, and they're trying to get through security. They're just carrying all this stuff, right? And they look so awkward and tired and sweaty. They're just trying to get all this stuff through and get on the plane. Now imagine if you could see what people are carrying every day in real life. Okay. It's not as comical. Yep. I imagine these big, tough, strong men that you pass on the street. And then now imagine them carrying a school bus on their back. You can't see it, but this thing is heavy. It weighs them down. It strips them of their future. It occupies and preoccupies every moment of their thoughts, because it's all they can do is just to get through the day with this thing. Back to Maya's quote, right? There's this thing that they can't talk about. They don't know who to talk about this with. Yeah. And they just feel so alone and so buried by this thing, this item, right? Now, if we could just kind of see that for a moment and look around us and see how many other people are carrying something large like this and not feel so alone in the moment. When I talked to you for our pre-chat, I just walked away from this going, there's so many guys today who are carrying this thing, whatever it is, and they don't know what to do with it. So having you come on, and again, knowing that a podcast is a safe place for somebody to listen to a conversation and get some kind of help or a connection or hear a story that could help them. I couldn't wait to have you on. I just knew that this was going to be a great conversation.
Well, bless you, brother. So before I forget, because I'll get off on a tangent, because the question will, I think, because you set it up so beautifully, for, the dad that's out there that says, okay, David, they've convinced me. I got to share this, but I don't know who to talk to. So here's my suggestion. Again, I'm not clinical. I'm just a guy. Is whoever, hopefully, that's not always the case, but just hopefully there's a person in your life that you can share some things with. Maybe not, you know, earth shattering, but just that. And here's how I would suggest that you set up the conversation. And it's really a one-way conversation. It says, so I come to Dave and I say, hey, brother, I have something that's really heavy on my heart. It's really weighing me down. And I just need to share it. I don't need, I appreciate you probably want to give me some advice maybe or some insights or anything else. Actually, right now, I don't need any of that. If you would please, I just need you to listen. Would you be okay with that? 99.999% of the time, the person's going to say, absolutely. And what you've done is you've set up the whole circumstance so that they're not, even out of good intention, saying, well, no, you should do this, or you should do this, or take Prozac, or whatever it is. And I'm for meds, by the way. Just I realize as I said that may come out like, oh my God, so set up the rules, if you will, of this situation, and then just share. And for the people who are listening, you know, you have to realize, you say, well, God, all I did was listen. Well, realize what, you know, as the saying goes, our listening creates a sanctuary for the homeless parts in another person. You're just like, and we know what it's like when someone really listens to us. Like they haven't said anything. They just allowed us the sacred space. You know, so this school bus, I love that metaphor, you know, that this big guy's holding, all of a sudden he's able, you know, maybe not to let it go, but at least put it down. You know, that's wow. Okay. At least I got a chance to put it down. You know, you pick it up again if you want. That's cool. Or maybe leave it there. Whatever. But yeah, just set it up, find the person, whoever it is, set it up. Just say, look, I got to share something with you that is just, it's incredibly important. And while I know you probably want to give me some insights and advice, which I'm sure are good right now, I don't need that. What I need you to do is just please listen and go from there.
So, David, can you give us some kind of insight what it was like to find that person for yourself?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so my situation is a little bit different in that I was actually surrounded by those people. I had made it up in my head that I couldn't. So there's nobody in multiple arm's lengths from me that I couldn't share. Like then and now, in this moment, if something were really bothering me, I've always had those people. But Chef David Chang has battled bipolar, and he talks about depression, and he put it in a way that just makes, you know, sometimes when you hear what somebody has said and you're like, oh my God, that's exactly right. He says, when you're depressed, you're convinced that everything you think is true. Not that you're stupid, not that you're crazy. So what I was in the late, up to the end of August 13 years ago was that, well, no, Deanna, my former wife, who's still a great friend, a huge supporter, my three brothers, people in the neighborhood where Dee and I lived, they don't want to hear, they don't want to hear what I have to say. If I told them what I have to say, that they would look at me differently. They would shun me. I would lose relationships, all of that. I believed it. I was convinced. So now, it all starts with my beloved. Well, I have two North Stars, as I like to say. I have my fiance, Summer, the love of my life, and then my eldest brother, John, who stepped in really way back when I was 7. So for the last 54 years, he's really been my father. And he continues that to this day. Very, very, we talk every day. And I'm 61 and he's 72.
Yeah.
So
I guess the one thing that I think of when I think of the men possibly listening to this podcast is that they're afraid. So fear leads to loneliness in some cases. Loneliness leads to possibly depression. And then you feel like you're separated from everyone. So then you're so inwardly focused that you think there's no one else that can help you or understand or who cares, and you feel like you're the only one in the world that's struggling. And I just want people to understand that if you could have that moment in time where you could realize how many people around you are struggling in different ways and in a different scope, but that we do struggle and that you are not alone. Your story might be unique, but there's someone beside you sitting on that bus today riding into work they think they're alone, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of that moment where you, as guys, and we get into a social circle and we meet people for the first time, we might be a little more reserved or a little bit more surface level. But when you meet somebody who is like you, who likes your sports team or your music or your movies or your nerd stuff, and you get this connection with somebody, you're like, hang on, right? You like this? I love this. I have been dying to talk to somebody who loves podcasting. Nobody here knows what I'm talking about, right? I'm like, finally, I get to meet somebody who likes to talk podcasting. Your world opens up. Yeah. And I think in the same way, when we struggle with our mental health, we think it's just us and there's no one else here who likes podcasting. There's no one else here who struggles with their mental health. But the moment you find out through your website, through you speaking on stages, through all of your resources, that there's this guy named David up there sharing his story with us. It's like, wait a second. I'm not the only one here that thinks like this, feels like this, has been down this path. There's someone else. And that feeling of joy in a sense where you're like, I'm not alone. Like, really? Are you seeing that from stage and through interactions with people that you come across?
Yeah. In fact, it was interesting. And I'm looking at my desk, reach over here and see if I have it. I got this incredible email. My beloved niece, Brooke, was having me gather some things together for the website. I can't find it. Anyway, it was an Army nurse who heard me lecture, speak, share. I think it's more sharing than anything else. And they shared me this incredible email. And it was this part of the email literally jumped in my mind, right, brother, when you were sharing right now. She said, you put to words for the first time ever what I have been feeling. And I was like, oh my God. Like, to be able, to play a part in that. And then when people say those things, and I had a guy, an officer at the last Friday gave a talk to a large group of Army soldiers, and an officer came up and said, that's the best training I've had in 36 years in the Army. And brother, I don't say that it's not about me. It's not. I think there's multiple things that set me up for success. The first was I got there a little bit early, and that same group of wonderfully committed soldiers who they were going through a PowerPoint presentation that was like the most god-awful boring thing I have ever seen in my life. I'm like, oh no. So the contrast, me telling stories, that was good. And, no PowerPoint, no data and everything else. And my brother, who's my dad, did 42 years in the Army. So I've lived on Army posts. I understand the Army. So I'm set up for success in a way that allows somebody and maybe this person had, well, no, they did. In fact, their daughter was suffering. So I think there was something about what I said appealed directly, and in the format and the juxtaposition of the most boring presentation in the history of mankind right before mine, it really set me up for success. I was like, thank you so much. I mean, I was listening to it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just awful. But it was mandatory training, so I had to go through it. So yes, I hear it every talk where someone will come up, and I'm incredibly humbled when they thank me for really giving voice to how they feel. That's probably the easiest way to say it. And I'm like, anytime. You know what? That's, yeah, it's, and I think, and I would say to the folks, the other group of dads that we're speaking to are the ones who are thankfully are not suffering, but maybe they have a dear friend or a child or whomever who is suffering, and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do to help them. And I come back with the same answer every time. Ask them. Say, hey, I get a sense, and please use this word specifically. I get a sense that you're suffering. Use that word. That's a really powerful, because this is suffering. I think it's beyond struggling. It's suffering. So, hey, I get a sense that you're suffering. And then just ask, what can I do to best support you? That's it. They may, and so I have a friend of mine who's going through a really tough period. And I didn't know, his mom called me and said, do you mind calling? And so my buddy and I had this great conversation, and I said, trying to follow my own advice, what can I do to support you? He said, you know what? Some Bible verses would really help. Like, text them. I said, okay, absolutely. Like, no problem at all. So just over, a couple months, just not every day, but every, other day or so. And sometimes it would take like 2 days before I would hear back from him. It was always right at the point where, like, I'm a little nervous, but I'm sure I'd hear from his mom if something was really bad, but then there'd be a text from him. So I'll do a little tangent here. For those dads who are supporting people like me who are suffering, if we don't immediately get back to you when you text us or call us or something else, sometimes it just takes us a little while to kind of bring the whole thing together. We sometimes need some space to digest it, just the way that it is. So anyway, this is going on for a while, and like a month ago, my buddy texts back and he says, hey, I got to tell you, I think I've turned a corner. And then he texts this: thanks for reminding me who I am. Like all I did was just send some. They were timely, they were specific, and they were authentic. Every single one ends with "I love you," but it's not me. And it's so simple. I couldn't believe when he wrote that back. I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. And to be able to play the part, because it what we do in support for one another comes through us. So it's impossible for us not to feel it. So as we provide support and relief for our brothers out there who are suffering, we will benefit. It's impossible not to.
So the one thing about podcasting that I love too, David, is the fact that, again, somebody's listening to this. Nobody knows what they're listening to. But the moment we can bring them into the conversation where they don't feel like they're sitting on the stands at a basketball game and nobody's there. It's just one person watching the game, and they feel like they're just over there in the corner listening to you and I have a conversation, but they would love to be a part of this. And if I went and switched spots with them in the stands and have them come sit here with you in the moment, and you could talk to them directly, not through me, not past them, but to them, similar to how you did with that other person sending them those messages.
Yeah.
Can you just take a moment and talk to them? They're here listening. What would you like to say to them?
The first thing I would say is, hey, dear brother, I am so sorry that you're suffering. Okay, I can't, while I can imagine potentially how it feels, I have no idea. So would you like to share with me, like, what's going on? What's happening? And then to listen, and then to follow up is like, wow, that's, the fact that you're able to continue keeping on based on what you are experiencing is truly Herculean. That's like what you're doing. Please give yourself grace for that. And then allow me to support you in some way. What may I do to best support you? Is it a phone call? Is it a text? Is it we go out to lunch once a week? What is it? Just let me know. And then if you're looking, if I may, to offer, one small bit of advice, if you're open for it, let's just assume this particular soul is, that they say, well, I don't know exactly what to do, then I would ask them, what's happening? What are the circumstances when you feel your best? And I'm not talking about like euphoric. I'm not even talking about happy. I'm talking about, it could even be less depressed. What's going on? What is, is it when you're taking a shower, or is it when you're eating, or whatever? Let's just identify what's going on. Or is it when you're with this particular person, or at this particular place? Let's identify what that is. So, okay, once we have that, is there a way that we can duplicate that? And there may not be. Like, okay, then let's do the notch down. Okay, that's when you feel your best. What's the next one down? And there's got to be some one of these that we're going to be able to identify, that we're going to be able to duplicate. And my suggestion is, let's duplicate those and figure out whatever the frequency is. Every day may be too much. Maybe do it 3 times a week. I don't know, whatever. But if it's somebody, when every time you get a text from this particular person, you always feel better. Well, let's reach out to that person and ask them to text us. It's okay. I can promise you, they're going to text you. They're not going to find it to be, especially when you say, I'm suffering and I could really use your help. Could you please text me once a day? They're going to feel honored to do that. So I think if we do any of these things, and then when you need to share something, call me on the phone. I'll just listen, unless you want me to offer some idea. But let's start there. Let's share with me now. Promise just to listen, and let's identify when you feel best, what's going on. Let's identify the circumstances, the activities, and the people, and any other detail about it, so that we can be really, if we can't perfectly duplicate that circumstance, we have enough of the characteristics in which we could maybe apply them. Well, let's wear a red shirt, that we always feel good when we wear a red shirt, but I can't wear a red shirt in this situation every day, but I could wear a red shirt over here, kind of silly, but that sort of thing. So that's what I would do for our brother who was sitting on the sideline, and to just say that, I will say this, especially last year, at the end of last year, I never thought, well, I'll read this. I'll read something too. I was waiting at an airport last Thursday, headed to New Orleans from Dayton, Ohio. And it was a 2-hour layover, and it's just kind of bored. And so I'm going through my phone, trying to get rid of some apps, and I go to the notes section. I'm like, I never use the notes section. This is what I found in my notes section. Brother, I wrote this on January 28th of this year. Walking around in Chicago O'Hare, completely void of hope. There's hell, and then there's hopelessness. Catatonic, whisper of a voice. No want of food. Open the door and jump out. Suicide making perfect sense. Shower was a workout. slow thinking, memory issues. It's all about the intensity of emotions. My depression is like a cancer. In reality, how long I've suffered from this. I choose to stay for my family. Just open the door of the car and fall into traffic. If I loved myself, I would do this. On March 10th, 2024, I wrote this. Had to promise Summer, who's my beloved, had to promise Summer I'd still be here when she came home from work. Pinky promised I'd still be alive. Goal was to make it through the day. Climbing a mountain to get through the day. Took my keys away from me. Cry on Summer's shoulder. I just want to die. I just want to die. Depression is deconstructing me slowly and agonizingly, piece by piece, until I'm certain there'll be nothing left but ash. So I wrote that 5 months ago, and I am not the same person in front of you right now. And that's all because of the treatment that I'm involved with. So to my brothers, our brothers, who are our dads, who are out there suffering, there is hope. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's fun. But I forgot about those. And when I read those last week, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. Because of how I feel now. And I'm not euphoric, but I'm not depressed. You know, I have bone on my left hip. It hurts like a lot. And my business has been struggling. It's just been interesting. I don't quite understand it. And the only reason I mention those two things is before, either of those instances in my life would have me go down depression alley, and there's going to be some whiff of suicidal thinking in my life. And I have both of these going on right now. I'm disappointed. I'm upset. I'm frustrated. I'm sad. I'm not depressed. That's very different. And I'm not suicidal. That's extraordinary to me. And so I say to our brothers out there, it is possible. I swear to you. And in this most recent experience, I'm more convinced of this because I'm living it. Like every day, I'm living it. Like my hip hasn't mysteriously healed. I got to go get a new one. Like, all right, I'm only 61. I'm like, what? Okay. Guess that's what I got to do.
It's amazing. When you read those words on your phone and a note app, did you see yourself writing those? Like, did you remember all of that? And
no,
you don't even really. So it's like another person wrote it. Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
No, David, it was absolutely. In fact, my depression and depth into suicidal thinking, which I had been in before, never to this depth. And it caught me totally off guard because I was doing everything that I knew to do, going to therapy, and I was taking my meds and all, working out, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and I read that. I mean, it literally shocked me because, to your point, it was like somebody else wrote it. I'm like, especially the one in March. I mean, January, I have enough memory of January where that was really bad. But I didn't know March was that bad. And for me in this treatment, and we had talked about ECT. And so for the folks who don't know, that's electroconvulsive therapy. Most people know it as shock therapy, but it's nothing like what you see on television. It's not. I had my 33rd session yesterday. Like, I'm functioning, and I just had a seizure yesterday. I'm doing pretty well. This particular method of treatment has been around for decades, but way back when, it was, I think, barbaric, maybe a little too intense, but it was tough. So here's what happens: it is typically what's the word I want? Prescribed for people who have what they call treatment-resistant depression, or it might even be mental illness, because people with schizophrenia and others use it. So I went in yesterday, saw my doctor, Dr. Marasa. So she put electrodes around my head. And then Joanne, the nurse I always see, she put a blood pressure cuff around my left ankle. And then the anesthesiologist, and it's always different. Names are big for me, and I don't have it connected with the same anesthesiologist. He's getting me ready to put the general anesthesia and the ketamine into me. So then we're all ready to go. And he does the ketamine injection first. And he always says the same thing. He says, "Are you ready for your nap?" I said, "Yes, I am." Boom. And out I go. Now, as soon as I'm asleep, then he gives me another drug, David, that completely paralyzes me. Everything. To the extent that he has to, in this case, the anesthesiologist has to breathe for me with a bag, over my mouth. And the reason is because if the seizure in my brain that they're inducing by electricity becomes too robust, they don't want me to get hurt flailing around. But I was wondering, okay, what's up with the blood pressure cuff down on my ankle? They crank that bad boy up so my foot doesn't become paralyzed, so they can watch the toes move back and forth for indication when the seizure starts and ends. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So seizure's over. It lasts more or less a minute. Then everything's calm. Then they take the paralysis away. And then, when I'm breathing on my own, everything's fine. Then they move me into recovery. And I'm there, hour or so. And then move into the next places where I'm sitting up in it, kind of like a lazy boy chair, just for like another 30 minutes. And and I've done it. So start to finish, I showed up yesterday at noon, and I was going home before 3:00. And, a little confused, just a little, not much. And I've had 33 of them. Now, average patient normally has about 11 or 12, but my situation was so bad, they were so worried that they've had to do far more. So now we started at 3 days a week. Now we're just once a month. And I love it. It is it's phenomenal. And now I'm on a mission to share really everything I share, but my hope is that a dad today who may unfortunately be suffering from something, and let's just call it depression for lack of a better thing, to identify one thing. And he's tried all these different things, and he's heard about electroconvulsive therapy, but like, oh, no, I would never do that. But maybe here's a guy that's done it 33 times as recently as yesterday, and it's changed his life. Maybe they'll go try it.
What kind of questions can we ask a doctor? I know we're talking general terms here, but what could we ask our doctor to bring this up as a possibility? Like, is there anything we can put in front of them and say, hey, I'm doing research and this is something I'm curious about? Is there anything we can ask to even just start the process of that?
Yeah, and it's interesting, unfortunately, and I don't know what it's like in Canada, but Canada tends to be so much more open-minded, I think, than my beloved country, who I would give my life for. So it's not a criticism. It's just, I think my hope would be, it'd be interesting to see what's the prevalence of ECT in Canada, but to ask a doctor, like, okay, what's your opinion? Like, hey, what do you think about ECT? I listened to a podcast, and this guy just can't say enough great things about it. And, what's your opinion? Because what I heard, and I heard this, I've heard it many times, and I heard it yesterday, I was shocked the first time I've heard it. Now I've heard it so many times, it doesn't shock me. There are psychiatrists who are against it. And I'm like, why would you be against ECT? Like, I don't understand. That makes no sense. Now, my psychiatrist is not. He's incredibly for it. And actually, I have two psychiatrists who are both phenomenal human beings. Again, they're part of my circle that I could pick up the phone and say, I need you. And at the end of my sessions with both of them, I say, I love you. And they say, I love you too. Incredible men. They're both huge proponents of it. But there are some. So I would say to the dads out there, if your doctor, and I'm not judging your doctor, if your doctor is vehemently against ECT, okay. Um, I, I'm not exactly sure what would inspire them to be so against ECT, but there are psychiatrists out there that don't believe in it. And I can't, I mean, I've done it 33 times. I've had no ill effects. My life was changed by it. You know, to not think about killing yourself when you've been thinking about killing yourself for like 50 years. That's pretty cool.
So the school bus is off your shoulders?
Yeah, I mean, there are other weights that I have. Right. But it's interesting. I told this story to my doctor the other day because I just want them to know how much I appreciate what they're doing. So like Wednesday was just a crap day. It just sucked for a variety of reasons. Hip was like 10 out of 10 pain-wise, and a speaking gig I was supposed to have. And they said, God, you know what? We're thinking about having you come in fall. We're thinking about fall of 2025.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, pretty impressive that you're thinking that far ahead. But so, it's like, so anyway, it was crap. And so I still am working on how to describe this. So, but you're incredibly loving and patient, so you'll bear with me. So if suicidal thinking had an aroma to it, I caught like, so these things are going on. It's a crap day. My pattern of 50 years has been, you know what, let's just forget about it. Just be done. It's like I caught a little whiff of that smell. And for the first time in my 61 years, I consciously went in and chose a different thought. It was phenomenal. I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, that's amazing. And it was almost, David, like I was watching somebody else. Just because it was such a well-worn pattern of six decades on the planet, you know, like anybody of 6 decades, you go through, you've seen some life and hardships and joys and everything else. And sometimes days just suck. My well-worn pattern has been depression, suicide. Let's just forget about it. And it just like there wasn't the fully developed thought, like the sensitivity, like there was a guard, was so on point, like caught a whiff. That's the thing, because it was a smell before there was a visual thing. And I like went in. It was almost like I took my hand and I went in and I took that and took it away and put something else in. Like I chose a different thought. That's, you know, and all the therapy, the incredible human beings that have coached me and mentored me, my beloved, who's a school psychologist, and my children, my dad, to be able to actually do those things, you know, to reframe something, like, it's amazing. And I asked my brother, my dad, because I think this is what ECT has done. He says, what I think is ECT has taken depression and like moved, it's like a big crane or like a backhoe or something, has moved it to give you access to all this other stuff that you have gone through. You know, I have what's called an IOP, an intensive outpatient program. So instead of I've spent 15 days in a lockdown psych ward, and I've done IOP, done a lot of different stuff, all these different things. He said, my brother said, you now have access to these to actually apply them. That's what ECT's done. I'm like, oh, wow. That makes sense. So for the dads that are listening, if you're at that point and maybe what had been working is no longer working, or nothing's working, if you're able to have a conversation with your care provider, just ask them for their opinion. You know, don't take mine. You know, I'm just a dude from California. just a goofy dude at that, and just see what's their opinion on ECT. And I'm sure there's a ton of stuff I've never looked at. And the question will come up, and before I forget, is like, well, how does it work? And I'll say two things. Basically, what they say is when the seizure happens, it floods my brain with neurotransmitters. It's just it's like a shower of neurotransmitters. And I think, well, for me, I cumulatively, it like rewired my brain, is what it's done, in effect. But and for me, it took from like January up till the beginning of April. So that's, a good 4 months of treatment. And my beloved, I remember the day she told me, she looked at me and she said, "You're back." She said, sometimes I'd be sitting, and we were talking about this just the other night. And I said, sometimes we were sitting, she'd say, "You want to watch some TV?" And I would be kind of indifferent. And she'd hand me the remote. And I like to watch cooking channels.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Just because I do. I don't like to cook, but I like to watch channels. So whatever. I love Gordon Ramsay.
Okay, yeah.
I just think he's like, I would love to meet him. I'd say, chef, my God. So there were, in this earlier part of the year, that summer would come back and I'd just be sitting there in the dark, holding the remote, not doing anything. It just broke her heart. It's like, and I asked, sweetheart, it occurred to me, like, how did you deal with your partner begging you to let him die? Because I know that had to be incredibly difficult. Like, I've never had anybody say that to me. And to think how, it wasn't like I just said it once. It's just like, wow, oh my gosh. It's hard. You look at the person that you love and you want to spend the rest of your life with is suffering to that extent that they don't believe life is worth living. It's tough. And there are ways that we can respond that can be really powerful. And I don't like to use the word solutions, because I think, not that I don't believe in an answer to a problem, but it's just, I just like to offer, for me, is just, I'm offering different responses. Let's respond this way. There's other ways. I don't want to come across like, oh yeah, this is the only way. Not the only way. I'm not credentialed enough. I have credentials, and I'm not. I just want to add one additional option for people to consider. That's all.
One thing I noticed too, Dave, looking at your website, all of the places that organizations and people that you've had an opportunity to speak in front of or be a part of their programs, and there's a long list of places you've helped. I know I have event planners that listen to the show, and they're looking for speakers.
Yeah.
So who would you love to speak for, or where? Or I know people would love to bring you on. So can you kind of give us a sense of that as well?
No, I would, brother. I would be so honored. And I can talk about lots of different things in the world of mental health. I like to distinguish between mental health and mental illness. Sometimes we use it typically as one term. Mental health is the goal. Mental illness is the condition. And I think that the fact that we don't say mental illness, I think, is emblematic of the fact that we're kind of dancing around the reality of the problem. So I can talk about mental illness because I've lived with it for 50 years. I can talk about mental health because I've experienced it. And I can talk both about suicide, and I can talk about male sexual trauma because I was, again, raped by a Boy Scout leader. And all my talks end very, very positive, very, very upbeat. If you don't want anybody to cry during their talk, don't have me come, because I will cry. So, but in terms of groups, I would love to get in. I've done a lot with the military, which, as you mentioned, is really important. I'd really like to expand. I've not done as much into the business community as I'd like to. And I want to, because the reality is there is a significant portion, as a percentage, of people as employees in companies of all size who, by whatever degree of separation, be it straight on or 1 degree of separation, is either suffering from a mental illness, or has a child or a spouse that's suffering from mental illness, or has a child or themselves is suicidal, or they've lost somebody to suicide, or they've been a victim of sexual. So, everybody, and the fact that the majority of organizations have not yet been empowered to create an environment in which employees can share, that's impacting retention, it's impacting productivity, and it's impacting profitability. So what I can promise you is I can reverse that. Not because I'm anything special, but because what I can do is I can teach you how to create a culture in which these things just become part of a normal conversation. And the results, the return on investment, it's off the charts. It's so businesses, and then also I'm really passionate to talk to schools, to kids. And just, my life continues to be supported and saved by amazing human beings. And I just want to share what they've done for me and make it applicable so that people can grab hold of it and find, hopefully the same amount of relief I found.
And you're part of that team as well. So all those people that you say surround you and help you and feed you and keep you where you are and love you, you're also one of those people for someone else.
Oh.
So just want you to understand that by being here with us and by being on stage and sharing your story and being you, there's somebody listening to this today that probably may have never heard of you before until today, and now they have an ally, they have someone to look to, they have someone to realize that they're not alone carrying that big school bus on their shoulders, as we talked about, and there's someone else out there that helps them feel not so alone in the moment. So just hearing your story and how open you are to talk about who you are and how you help just by sharing a story, that's amazing to me.
Thank you, brother. And thank you. Been looking forward to this for a long time. Good stuff.
Okay, David, so take us to the website, all your information. We'll put it in the notes.
Sure. So David Woods is my middle name, Woods Bartley, Bartley. So davidwoodsbartley.com. And then call me, if you're calling from Canada. I think the United States initial number is a 01 or a 1.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's 916-247-6389. If you're a practitioner and you have a patient who's hesitant about ECT or something else, call me. You don't even need to tell me that. My psychiatrist texted me the other day. I said, "Of course you can get my number out." I said it to my doctor yesterday as I'm about to have ECT. Just seriously, call me. And then email David at davidwoods, Woods Bartley.com.
Okay. We'll put that in the show notes. That's very kind of you, David, to be available in that way as well.
Oh,
right.
If I look at, so every day, without fail, I wake up, first thing I do is grab my phone and there's a text from my dad. And it's always the same thing. Here's what he's going to do. Here's his guidance, advice, instruction for me, because that's what I've asked of him. And a motivational quote. Every day.
Wow.
That never misses. Amazing.
That's great.
Yeah. And my other two brothers, just as great.
Awesome. David, I'm so happy that we've crossed paths. I think for some reason people are meant to meet people in their life, So
yes,
I'm so thrilled that you and I could connect
likewise
like this. So
likewise, love you, brother. You are the best. Thank you for what you do, and thank you so much for allowing me to be with you and this connection. So, which is forever. You're stuck with me now, so don't think that.
And to the person listening right now, again, nobody knows. You could be listening to Ariana Grande, Christina Aguilera. I don't know what you're listening. Nobody knows what you're listening to except you. And take David up on his offer. Reach out to him. The number's right there on your phone. Send him a text. send him whatever. Reach out to David and let him know. I know he'd love to hear from you as well. So,
What?
okay. David, thank you so much. I'm following with great interest and great love and admiration for all that you do for us. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, thanks for listening to Dad Space. Thanks for hanging out to the end of the podcast. That's a great sign to wherever you're listening to this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, fill in the blank, that this was a good podcast to send people to. So simply by listening to this point of the podcast, you're helping the show grow. So good on you. Thanks for helping us grow Dad Space. If you want to help us fill our cups over at Dad Space, head over to dadspace.ca. Dadspace.ca, simple website, right? Dadspace.ca. You can fill up our coffee cup, which helps us then to keep moving forward with the podcast, and use our Buy Me a Coffee link over at dadspace.ca. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for sharing. Because the more dads we can help, the better. We're all here to help each other grow in community. That's what it's all about. And without you, the podcast is pointless. There's no reason to do any of this. So you being here means everything. See you at dadspace.ca. Take care.